Let's go ahead and get started by creating a new project. So have Android Studio open. I'm going to say File, New, Project as such, and it's going to be an empty compose activity. Say Next. And in this case here, I'm actually going to go to a folder that I've already created where this will live, and you can just pick whatever you want. But for me, I'm going to go to a special place called BizCard, like that. And there we go. I'm going to say Open. I'm going to say Finish. It's going to start. So the Gradle is building everything in the background so we can create a new project. Now, the reason why you see all of this is because this is actually connected to GitHub repo. So that's why we have all this, the README and so forth. In your case, you won't see any of this. So that's totally fine. After a few moments, you should be able to see a project like this. Okay? There's a lot of code that comes with this pre-configured project, as you see here. Okay, so there's a few things that may be shaky at this moment because we've never seen it. But I also want to remind you that this small app we're going to be building, it's just going to be something to show off per se what can be done with Android Compose, Jetpack Compose. Okay, so at this point, I'm just assuming that you're new and we just want to get something to go right away. Okay, so if you don't understand a few things here, in fact, it is expected that you want to understand everything. That is okay. Again, I repeat, that is totally okay. Just go along with the ride. I'm just going to show you how to build a business card to show off, as I said, what can be done with Compose. So don't worry if you don't understand everything. We will have plenty of time to actually dig into this whole Android Jetpack Compose thing. Okay? All right, very good. Okay, so what are we going to be building? As I've mentioned earlier, this is what we're going to be putting together. So as I say, it's a business card. Probably should call it more of an e-business card, right? So it kind of shows you a few things that we're going to put together. So it's going to be, first of all, we're going to have some sort of a nice layout at the background. Okay, and then we're going to have an image. Of course, we're going to have the name and then the profession, and then of course the Twitter handle, and then a button. So this button portfolio was once clicked, we're going to show off some sort of a list containing projects that this programmer has worked on, right? So very simplistic, but nonetheless, it's going to hopefully get you going. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so one thing we need to look at real quick here is what is going on. So first of all, we have this main activity class, which in this case inherits from component activity. And we have the override on create. So this is where essentially the entry point of an Android application. Okay, so the thing you notice also here that we have this set content method, if you will. This is actually Lambda, but don't worry, we never talked about Lambda. We haven't talked about Lambda before, so this is fine. So just think of a block of code where we can actually pass another block of code, which we can also pass another block of code, as you can see. Okay, so we have the set content, as the name implied. This is where we're going to set the content of the view of the activity. And then we pass here this BizCard theme. So this is all created. Remember, this is not something that we have written ourselves. This comes when we use the wizard to create a Compose application. So all of this is given. So small pieces here. And then we have this surface thing. Looks like a class, looks like a method. We don't know what this is yet. But what we know is the surface, what it does is we are able to pass in a color. So it goes to material themes, it gets colors, and then get the background color, okay? Right? And then, of course, there is a block code that we can pass inside of this surface. So if you think about this, the surface is going to be some sort of a canvas. It makes sense, right? So inside of that canvas, we're saying we're going to pass something else. In this case, it's going to be greeting, which if you click and highlight it, you can see that it is indeed here a function which has this add composable, and we'll get into that. So what are we saying here is that this greeting we pass in a string. As you see, there's a string, and then it's going to do something, right? We're going to have this text. This text is going to have a text, obviously, and we're going to pass this name that's being passed through our greeting function. Okay, so that's why you say when we pass greeting, we pass Android, we see it says hello Android. So what do we have to the right here? Now, if you don't see this, that probably means you have this toggle, the code only toggle. So all you have to do is just go to split mode to be able to preview what we have here. In fact, you can also move to the right to make it smaller or larger. What's actually happening here is that if you scroll back down here, you'll see that we have another function called default preview. Again, all of this was created by our wizard Android Studio and did all for that, so that we have some sort of a basic skeleton of a Compose app. So this default preview here is what's being called. In fact, if you make this a little bit bigger again, in fact, you can't quite, but if you hover over here, you'll see it's calling default preview, right? So this is what it's being called to render here. All right, so that means then, notice we also calling the greeting and passing the Android. So what's happening here, this greeting that's been passed, it's not what we are seeing here. This will be seen if we run this application, right, to push that onto an emulator. All right, so if I come here and say, and I change this to something very gibberishy, you'll notice I come up here now at the top. I'm going to refresh. In fact, I didn't have to because I went directly to this default preview and it changed there. So it's really nice because we're able then to change things or create what they call composable. So essentially these functions that we can actually preview pieces of code to create a user interface, and we can see that preview here as opposed to having to run the application onto the emulator and so forth. All right, so just a few basics here. And remember, this is just the beginning. We will go through all these things. We have many hours coming up where we're going through all of this in more details. Again, I just want to get you going real quick here, but I thought I will just give you a small preview of what's going on. No pun intended, of course. All right, very good. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get rid of that. And of course, we're going to have a problem because the function that we just got rid of, it's being called in two places. So that's not a problem. And I'm going to also get rid of that, okay, and get rid of that, so that would have a problem. And what I'm going to do then, I'm going to go ahead and say at, and start typing composable like that. So this is needed to tell the compiler that this is a composable function, which means it's part of the compose library, which allows us to create functions that we then are able to pass on and see the default here, but also pass on onto our emulator. All right, so just follow along. I'm going to say fun to say function. I'm going to call this create like this, create BizCard like that. Okay, so this is going to be our composable function that we can call anywhere we want. But most importantly, we're going to call inside here on default view, default preview, I should say. This, I'm going to say create BizCard like that. And of course, I'm just going to call inside of this surface here. Let me make this a little smaller so perhaps we have more space. So here I'm going to say BizCard and hit enter. All right, so now if I refresh, you'll see that we're not going to have much. In fact, we won't see anything, which is a good thing because we haven't done anything inside of our composable create BizCard. Now, this may take a little while and we can always continue working on what we're doing here until this runs, okay, because we're refreshing everything, it's rendering, previewing, and it may take a little bit of time. So just be a little bit patient. Okay, and there we go. As you see, we see nothing really. It's just a little blip of a white dot there. We haven't done anything inside of a create biz. So let's do something. I'm going to say text, right? We want to show text. If you start typing text, you can see now we have this possibility of things that we can pass in, right? Again, these are functions that come with Compose library. So they are available for us to use. So if I hit enter, notice that I can pass text. This is the same thing we had before, okay? But I'm just going to show you how all of this is created. So I'm going to say BizCard as such and go ahead and refresh again. We should now see something, hopefully. Aha. And there we go. Now we can see it says BizCard. So we created a text, right, which is actually another composable, but we'll get to that. And we pass in BizCard as the text we want to see. And you can see there it is, BizCard. Very good. Now, that's not what we want. What we want to do is to start putting together the user interface, which means this, right? This whole enterprise, if you will. So we're going to start really small here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create this outer layer, as you see there, right? It's just like a card that looks really nice with nice corner borders there. All right, let's do that. How do we do that? Well, what we can do is we can, of course, use what Compose already gives to us. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put it inside of a surface. Yes, another surface. So a surface in this case is just a canvas. Whenever we want to create something that will be shown on the screen, we use a surface. There are other surfaces or other subtypes of surfaces, but we're going to start with a surface because this is going to be the main background, if you will. So I'm going to hit enter, and this may happen. So it's just importing the whole namespace, if you will, so or package. So here, as you can see, a lot of things are showing here. So we have Android X, Compose material. That's not interesting to us. We can actually just get rid of that, or I'll show you later how to automatically get rid of that. That's fine. So our surface here allows us to pass a few parameters. So things that we can pass here to say, okay, how is this surface going to appear appear on the screen. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to type with me, I'm going to say modifier, right? And hit enter. So modifier, as the name implies, allows us to modify this entire surface. So we can actually customize it, make it look good. All right. So there are a lot of properties we can pass with a modifier. So the first thing we want to do, we want to make sure that we make this whole surface, this whole canvas, to fill max width. So I'm going to start typing fill like this, and you can see I have options. So we can go up and down until you find the right option, right? The max width like that. Okay. And then still inside of this modifier, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say dot. I'm going to access another property, which is the fill max height like that. Okay. Very good. And you can see now we have this block, the blocks here. That means then what is it that we want to do inside of this surface? What we're saying right now here is that we've created, I'll show you in a second, something like this that will take up the entire space of the screen. Now we want to say, okay, what is that we're going to put inside of this screen? All right. Well, let's go ahead and refresh, first of all, the entire surface to see what's going to happen. And voila. And as you do that, you can see now we have this surface. Make this a little bit bigger. So you can see there it is, our surface. So it's taking up all the space. In fact, let's make this a better size. So you can toggle here to zoom to fit the screen, or you can make it larger by zooming in or zooming out. Okay, there we go. So now you see we have our surface. This is good. So we have an underlining canvas where we can work in. So that's all we did inside of our Create BizCard surface there. So now inside here, we can do the work we want, right? So inside of our surface now, inside of this block here, right? This is where we can start putting things into our user interface, namely something like this. All right, we're going to continue in the next video.